and I would like to share with you some of the things we've been working on and the radar for the next GeneXus version, which is called Salto. I will focus on 3 areas. One is the standards area, standards for the web industry. They are already established. Some are already incorporated, others we are adapting. Then I will tell you about the improvements at the level of the user interface to acquire usability and improve experience. And finally, I'll tell you what we are doing at the level of models, the development environment, with the purpose of simplifying our programming. In terms of standards, there are 2 on which we've been working, that we incorporated some time ago. The standards that determine when an HTML code or a CSS code one is valid and the other is correct. These standards that we've been paying attention to for a long time make the application more quality-like. They guarantee the quality of the application, its evolution, that it will be seen alike in different navigators. But apart from these 2 standards, in GeneXus we are incorporating and we are paying attention to this step, another step up, which is the standard of accessibility. In a few words, a web application is accessible if people with some sort of disability are able to navigate, interact, and understand a web page. For example, one of the standards says that a web page, non-textual content, should provide an alternative text, for example, images. So, if a person with a visual disability sees the page, the person can understand the semantics of that page through a robot, a tool, or an image. And therefore, they have a large set of guidelines to follow to improve the understanding of the application. In many countries, it's a law. In Uruguay, there is a regulation that stipulates that software for the services of the state should conform to these standards. This will improve the overall accessibility of the application and not just the situation of disabled persons. It will benefit people without disabilities as well, where the internet connection is very slow, or the elder, or people who have no mobile devices. It also has an impact on the visibility when we use browsers. If an application is accessible, the ranking will be much better. Like other standards, in HTML and CSS, they are another quality check that guarantee that the application will evolve as the navigators evolve. So, in GeneXus, in our building process, we incorporate a further step in order to contemplate these accessibility standards. In our process, we have several usage cases that are mathematically tested, and we check that the generated code meets the standards. And we want one application generated with GeneXus and following the good programming practices is by default accessible. So far, I have been relating to you standards that relate to the interface code. Now I will tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing for standards in the non-visual part of the application. That is the back end or the set of APIs of services that we have in any web application or native application on smart devices. Over the years, these services or APIs have had different names, formats, like SOAP, or the current more popular choice, REST. REST has appeared as an alternative. It's lighter in soft services, but unlike SOAP that has a WSDL that is self-descriptive, where we have a definition of methods, parameters, interface, REST and GeneXus do not have a practical way of exposing that interface. So, if in the KB you have a set of REST services, you need somebody else to consume those services, to expose them to those services. Today, you would have to manually describe the operations you provide. If you have the customer transaction as a REST service, someone will consume it, and I need to put a detail, a description of how to do it, how the interface works. So GeneXus is working for that interface to be described automatically, so that it's not necessary to program things. And to do this, we are using several specifications for REST. This one is called Swagger. It's very popular today. It's a very simple specification, a text file where you use JSON format to, for example, to describe the methods and the parameters. You see that here we have a list of all the APIs, the REST APIs I have with their description. Swagger is very popular. We have an ecosystem of tools around it. For example, this editor. This is an open source editor that works on the navigator, and we import that file with a definition defined by GeneXus, and this allows us to navigate the APIs in a graphical way that's very comfortable. You see here how you consume the file that was generated by GeneXus, and I can see the state of business components, data providers, and procedures that I have as REST. I can go inside each of the operations of each REST service and get a detail of the parameters that are received, what it returns, and you can also try this operation online. So GeneXus Salto will give us a generator with this description of REST services. It's going to be present in all the generators, Net, Java, Ruby. And with this, we will be able to make the component of applications visible. Today it's a little dark. And interoperability will become much easier. So far, the standards that I wanted to talk about. Now I will refer to what we've been doing in terms of user interface for web applications. You probably heard in different presentations that there's evidence revealing that mobile devices are growing tremendously. Like this news here, saying that by 2014 was a special year because access to internet exceeded for the first time the use of internet since the PC was used. Or Google's announcement saying that they would penalize pages that were not mobile friendly when searching from a mobile device. These are all news that somehow point to this growth of mobile devices, and this has had an influence in the way developers define their web applications. So in the user interface, we have focused on improvements without losing sight, or rather with the object of having a web page that is adaptable, responsive, and that looks fine, whatever the size of the screen. This is an example of the event application, its web version. And you'll see, this is my example because it was done with GeneXus Salto. And the screens are adaptable. It's responsive as well. In this sense, one of the things that we want to have in Salto is a renewed interface of the pattern work with. The pattern work with is a pattern that allows us to generate most of the back end of an application. It's generated from a transaction of a set of objects. We update data and records. And here we need a layout that's different, renovated, more modern, based on what we call a card layout. It has rectangular areas. This is an image of what it would look like in the desktop if we have the new interface of the work with pattern. And we have the cards, which are components with a type of information. And in the same screen, I have a list of customers and a detail of the registers that I have chosen. I should have a vision of different actions in the same screen without having to navigate to other screens or do actions in the same screen by using pop-ups. This helps us edit the company. This is a pattern that also adapts to smaller screen sizes. This is an image to give you an idea of where we want to go. The pattern work with will be the same. The list and file will not change. You don't have to reprogram anything. We just want to give you an option to generate a more modern interface. Next, in terms of improvements at the level of screens so that they adapt and are richer to the user experience, we add in Salto a new control. This is when I want to upload many files through the web interface. That multiple file upload control is an HTML5 control that will be distributed as part of the GeneXus standard control. This is a file upload. And I want to show you how to see this control. Imagine that here I have the transaction corresponding to the material of a presentation. This line, this row with 3 buttons, green, blue, and orange, have to do with the control of file upload. So you can enter the data for the transaction and then choose files. For example, this audio, it shows a preview. And I will select a set of multiple images and I will use it with drag and drop. Also a preview of those images. I select files, then a video. I have a preview. I could press play to see what the video contains. And once I have selected the associated files, I do Start Upload button and they will go up to the server. Each of them has a progress bar, which is individual, and this control has an SDT associated internally, including a collection corresponding to the files that you are uploading. It is adaptable, as I said, following the objective of having things that are responsive and adaptable. This is what it would look like in a smaller screen. Now I want to show you another control, which is the action group. It allows you to have drop-down menus. It allows you to have different types of controls as variables, buttons, and this is how we want to carry on with other controls, we want to add and improve this user interface. Do the same with other types of controls. This menu could be seen in a smaller screen when it's collapsed, or like this when it is expanded. Our plan is to keep on working along this line, improve them. These are examples of what we're doing, but the focus is on gaining more usability. Finally, I want to move on to the development environment, where we have also been working. In this case, the focus has been to simplify programming and also to facilitate the development of the aesthetics of an application. Many of you will remember that in Evolution 3 we introduced a change in the events to simplify programming. In the user events, we do not execute the start, the refresh. And we want to carry on to solve other cases of usage. For example, this case of use where I have a user event with 2 calls to 2 web panels. Imagine this is a web panel event. And I want in the event ingresar, I want to call the login web panel, and depending on what we do on the screen, to call the web panel home. This code does not do today what you would intuitively expect. It will call the login panel and the home will not be executed. And this is one of the things we want to improve, to achieve more simplicity and to unify the model to Windows generators or the smart devices generators. Now moving on to aesthetics and modeling. Here we have been working in a responsive layout editor. We added properties that make it easier for us to model the layouts of the screen. Some of these improvements are very important or very necessary, and we are transposing them to Evolution 3. And we want to keep on working with this editor so that the whole development of the aesthetics of the application is easier. Another topic, themes. Themes represent an area. If you want to do specific things, you require cascade knowledge. So we want to increase the level of abstraction so as to make it easier to define behaviors, the aesthetics of one control given the interaction of a user. For example, if today I were to define that one text block is different when the mouse goes over it, like in green or red or underlined, or if I want an image to change when the mouse goes over it, today that kind of aesthetic requires basic knowledge of cascaded sheet because we have to do it by defining custom classes. This is one of the things that GeneXus Salto is going to solve by adding a set of properties text block class to do a configuration of the text block when the user interacts, when the mouse runs over the word, when control takes a focus, if it's a link, when it's visited, and so on. This is what we want to have for all controls. Buttons, images, etc. Finally, I want to tell you something about the developer environment, and this is the new way we work, live editing, which was added for smart devices and web generators. And it also focuses on facilitating the development of the aesthetics of an application. Let's imagine that we have the web panel on the left with a web form that is responsive, and on the right, in the browser, we see, as it appears on your right, it's just one article with text that has been uploaded under Start event. Let's imagine that the designer sends us this draft. So we want the right thing to appear as a draft sent by the designer. So here live editing starts operating. We can use this modality to speed up these changes and the styles to the GeneXus object, and I can try it and test it. At this point, the first thing I do is send the IDE to the live editing mode, and I work directly on the subject by transferring the styles. You see here that I'm going to the associated theme, to the title class, which is the class associated to the title of the article. So I start changing the properties, and on the right you see the change simultaneously. I will change the font, I will use the font face. See the effect on the right. Letter color. I'm not saving the changes. I'm not generating or executing again. I only have the navigator, and I'm doing the changes in the theme. For example, now I'm going to change the color at the back of the table containing the article. I'm going to use a dark color, and this appears right away. Finally, I'm going to change the class associated to the text in the article. I'm going to use the white color that was used originally in the draft. So very quickly I can get the aesthetics that the designer wanted. So, to sum up, some of the things we are doing with Salto have to do with incorporation of standards in the user interface, for accessibility, which has become very relevant, Swagger as a new interface or descriptive file for the REST services. In the user interface, I showed you a new graphic interface for the world width pattern. It's the same pattern, but it will only renovate its aesthetics, its looks. The controls, where we are working by adding new controls for new usability. And finally, models. And in modeling, we want to simplify programming of events, and we want to help it become faster and simpler when you need to do the configuration of an application. Many of these things you can start trying with in the night builds of Salto that are published. We invite you to try this, to give us your feedback or to make the necessary consultations. And in addition, I would like to mention, for those of you who did not attend the presentation on Monday, if you want to see the material in Sabrina's presentation, she talked about responsive web design. She tells us what you can do today with Evolution 3. This is all I have to share with you. Thank you so much.